Hey everybody, this is Christy with Campfire. We've got about 30 folks live joining us for today's workshop. Really excited to have you all. Thanks so much for joining us and taking a minute out of your day to learn a little bit more about social media and marketing. We've got a couple of folks in the chat introducing themselves. I would love for you all to do that as well. And I'm going to introduce our other two folks we have right now. This is Lauren Stewart, one of Campfire's co-founders, and Chelsea Glowacki, one of our designers and operations support specialists on our team. I'm Christy Thompson. I'm one of the partners. I focus on marketing and business development for Campfire, as well as some creative direction. And today, Lauren and Chelsea are going to help out in the chat. So if you guys have questions or want to bring stuff up during our conversation, you can definitely do that there. There's also a ask a question button kind of at the bottom of your screen. That's a great place to kind of pop in your specific questions for Q&A at the end that you maybe want to hear us answer in person or live on the screen. So if you want to jot down questions in that area, we'll circle back to those at the very end. And what else? I think that's all. We'll go ahead and dive in. There's a fair amount of content to cover. I know I called this a mini workshop, but honestly, it's pretty full-blown workshop at this point. So we're going to try and keep it short to about 30 minutes, and then we'll dive into some Q&A. So Lauren and Chelsea, if you guys can turn your screens off real quick, and then I will push this screen a little bit bigger so you guys can see that. All right, cool. Just to make sure everybody knows where we're at, today we are talking about using patterns to plan your marketing content. But before I really get into the nitty-gritty of what we're talking about today, I wanted to share a little bit about Campfire Co. for anybody who's not already familiar. We are a design studio in Richmond that specializes in brand strategy, graphic identities, websites, and interior design for creative businesses. We are in our 8th year of business and are proudly headquartered typically in the Fan District, but right now from our homes across the city. We have currently a team of 6 designers and strategists across interior design, graphic design, and web design, as well as marketing. We are a hyper-collaborative team, and we are really missing sitting next to each other every day right now, but trying to make do working from home. If you're not familiar at all with Campfire, even if you never heard of us or never looked at our website, if you live in Richmond or in the area, you may have interacted with one of our projects that we've worked on. Perhaps you've ordered delivery from Sears Vodka lately. You might have gotten a fresh cut from High Point Barbershop in the past, or maybe you're staying up to date on the latest with the Richmond experience, and maybe you've even recently donated to the Holly Fund. These are just a few of the projects that Campfire has had the pleasure of working on locally, and we just kind of wanted to take some of the ideas that we've used with our clients and how we represent ourselves and promote our own work and kind of share that with you. So let's get into the meat of this. Today, we are focusing on how brands use content marketing to engage their audiences and how patterns can be something that helps you plan your content marketing. Just to make sure we're all on the same page before we get started, I wanted to define what is content marketing. For those of us that aren't always, using these buzzwords or kind of in the jargon of marketing, what does content marketing mean? It is simply the process of creating and sharing content to engage with your audience. The purpose of content marketing can be a couple different things, but typically surrounds the ideas of building brand awareness, connecting to a specific audience, encouraging more meaningful interaction with your audience, and ultimately trying to increase leads or sales. Whatever is sort of your end-all, be-all business goal, obviously we want to make that or encourage that action at the end of the day. So what does that look like? For Campfire, we really focus our content marketing within our blog and on our Instagram. Our big goal really is to drive traffic to our website because our website is one of the main lead generation portals that we have. We typically like to encourage clients to go to our contact form to reach out. And so pushing people to our website is our big goal. We utilize our blog and our Instagram to do that. Other areas of content marketing or other tactics can include podcasts, videos, newsletters, email newsletters or print, case studies, Medium articles, basically anywhere you are creating or sharing information to your audience is content marketing. So let's dive in. How can you get started creating more content and sharing content with your audience? If you've ever heard Campfire present, you will know that our first step is always to set some goals. I actually said basically this exact same thing in our workshop, and if you continue to join us, I'll probably say something similar at the end of it, or at the beginning of every workshop. Setting goals is really important. And I also want you, in addition to thinking about your goals when you're getting started, to consider your audience. So let me explain. Your goals could include big picture things like educating your audience on a specific topic or showcasing your expertise in order to become seen as a thought leader in your industry. Your goals could also be nitty-gritty, like increasing traffic to your website, getting more followers on social, getting more engagement through additional clicks and comments. I would really challenge you when you sit down to look at your goals or to create some goals to think beyond the beginning idea of, well, I want to get hired or I want to sell this product, and really go beyond and create some interim goals that will help lead to that eventual outcome. When considering your audience, I really want you to empathize with their situation and think about some things like what entertains them. Do they like beautiful pictures? Do they like funny things? What kinds of stuff do they will make them happy? What pain points might they be having in relationship to you or your services? What types of things might they want to learn that maybe you could teach them? What questions do they have that you have the answer to? Finally, where else are they engaging with content on the internet? Consider researching your competition or your brand crushes to get an idea of what similar audiences to your audience are doing or engaging with. Next up, with your goals and your audience in mind, it's time to start brainstorming and documenting your content ideas. Start by making a big list of ideas. This can be something that lives on a spreadsheet or on a big piece of paper, on a whiteboard, really anywhere that you can start to get your ideas out of your head. Start writing down every single idea you've ever thought about for your potential content. This can be projects you've completed, processes that you want to explain, tools that you use, educational resources you have access to, behind the scenes information. Any of that stuff can be content that you create. Sometimes it helps to think about your day in the life of your business. If you were to write down everything you do during a day, or even the highlights of your week, what kind of content or what kind of moments within that week or that day might be something that could be interesting to your audience. Noodle on all of that and really just ideate and brainstorm. Sometimes it helps to bring a friend in for that, but spend some real time thinking about your ideas. Now, once you've got all those ideas written down, start to pair like with like. Do you have a lot of completed projects to share? Do you have a lot of tools that you want to talk about? Do you host events a lot and you want to share about those? See what kinds of themes and commonalities are bubbling to the surface, and try and create at least 3 categories for that. If your categories are getting really big, let's say you've got finished projects as a category of yours, and you've got 50 projects in there, you might want to start thinking about, okay, how else could I break down that category and consider a subcategory? Once you have a few ideas and a couple categories, it's time to document and refine. So you've got your big list of ideas, and now I want you to take those, and maybe was on paper, it was on a whiteboard, it's maybe in a messy spreadsheet. Let's put it somewhere new and start to refine and add more detail. We like to work in a spreadsheet because for me, that's the easiest place to start elaborating on my ideas and starting to create more sort of specific details that will help me decide when I want to share what. So if you're working in a spreadsheet, consider adding new columns to each idea, and you might look into, where does this content live? Is it a blog post? Is it a social media post? Is it a YouTube video? Where else will you share this content? Beyond its source, where will you push it to? Will you push it to social? Will you put it in your email newsletter? Is the content time sensitive? Does it have like a specific date associated with it? Is there a time of year? Does it need a subcategory? Like I mentioned before, maybe there's a bigger category, but maybe there's another column for a subcategory of that. Use these columns to create a better view of all of your potential content, and then start to tidy up that spreadsheet. Make headers, make columns easy to read, and then save it somewhere really handy. This is something that you're going to refer back to often, so you want to make sure that it's something that you can use. So let's take a peek at what this can actually look like. This is a screenshot of a portion of my actual content idea list that I created in Google Sheets. After I wrote down my ideas, I began to categorize them. I added a couple subcategories, and then I started to add my additional details to keep variety into my content, right? For Campfire, it's really important to me that I not only have variety in the types of content I'm sharing, but also in the service type that it's featuring. So we offer branding services, website services, and interior design services. And I want to make sure that my audience is reminded that we do all three of those things. So I have service listed as a column in my idea list to make sure that I can pull from that list and put into my calendar and make sure that I'm showing all three of those services on a regular basis. I also have source listed. So for us, like I was mentioning before, really our goal is to push people back to our website. So our main source of content is our blog. And then I've also added a column for date specific, because sometimes I need to remember that my content is only relevant at a specific time of year, and I don't want to forget that in April and October, I want to post about Richmond Restaurant Week. So I have that date listed there as well. And then finally, I just want to note that this particular screenshot, this is my final draft. This has started with a lot of really messy lists and spreadsheets before I organized my ideas into this particular one. So I'll encourage you to take the time to do the messy work, whether that is in your sketchpad or that is on a whiteboard or whatever it is, and then take some time to organize it, put it in a spreadsheet, and then actually put a little bit of effort into making it visually easy for you to engage with, right? You want to actually be able to use it. So for me, the more visually appealing it is, the more likely I am to come back to it. Okay, now that we've got our ideas organized and documented, it is time to create your pattern and put it on a schedule. I want to start by talking about patterns. For our purposes, I really consider a pattern to basically just mean a rotating template of themes. Themes can kind of be around anything. They can be specific to your content type or your elements of your content, or they can be visually inspired. A few examples of content elements that you could use to create a pattern would be, specifically for type, you could rotate a category of your content. You could rotate potentially a type of project or a type of offering. You could rotate a project phase, whether that's a kickoff phase, a process, or a completed project. When thinking about photography or graphics, you could potentially rotate minimal versus complex compositions. You could also rotate just bright white photography with more dark saturated photography. Finally, you can also think about rotating the type of content or the source. So potentially written versus imagery, or long form versus short form. These are basically just aspects of the content you are creating, little pieces that we can pull out to the surface and say, okay, I want to post 3 of these things, then 3 of these things, and then 3 of these things. And then when we repeat that and we start to create a pattern. You can do more than one of these in your pattern, or you can just start with one. It really kind of depends on your bandwidth, how complex you want to sort of make your process, or really what your goals are. Now that you have an idea of what elements can be used to create the pattern, let's talk about a few other important considerations. Do you have a channel that will drive your pattern? Because Campfire is a design studio, visuals are a really important part of our content marketing. And because of that, Instagram is one of the things that really drives our pattern creation. We have kind of gone back and forth as to whether or not we do an every other or we do once a week. Right now, we're kind of going once a week. But maybe for you, if it's not visual inspired, it could be your blog or your Medium account or something else where you're posting your content. But consider whether or not a platform should have an implication on that. Additionally, how often do you want your pattern to repeat? Do you want to switch it up every day, once a week, once a month? How often do you plan to share new content? Are you going to create new content multiple times a week, monthly, quarterly? Finally, what is your realistic bandwidth for that content creation? These three questions really tie together, and I want you to think about how often your pattern repeats and how frequently you need to create new content, because it should be in direct correlation to your bandwidth. Make sure to factor in your time, because that's a really important process of how successful you'll be in this. Finally, how rigid is your routine? For us, there's basically one aspect of my pattern that I'm pretty rigid about, and that is that I want to post 3 times a week on Instagram. And the rest of my pattern is really just a general guideline to make sure I'm encouraging myself to post a variety of types of services and a variety in terms of the actual content type, whether that be resources, design stories, etc. Make sure that you don't make your pattern so rigid that it is hard to keep up. So I'll encourage you to kind of think about parts of your pattern that are really important to you and maybe parts that can be a little bit more flexible. Let's take a look at an example from Campfire's content calendar. This is an actual screenshot of my content calendar, sort of a portion of it. You can see I have a template that I have at the top, and I'll sort of explain. I basically have a couple overlapping patterns that I use. Not everybody has to approach it with that much complexity, but that's important to me. I want to have visual variety. I also want to have variety in my category, and I want to have variety in the service that I'm sharing. So those are the 3 things that I consider when I created a template. But mostly what I'm trying to do is post on 1 theme per week with 3 images that are associated with that theme. So that's where I start. I have my template at the top, and then below that, you can see where I'm starting to plan on a monthly and weekly basis. So my content ideas are coming directly from that big list I showed you before, and then I'm putting the content idea into the calendar based on what's timely, what service is next up in my pattern, or what category hasn't been shared in a while. I also include a column here in my calendar for visuals, because this drives a lot of my planning and is really connected to what service is shown. Additionally, you can see that some areas of my pattern change more often than others. Right now, we're really focused on sharing resources within our content categories, but we're still rotating the services we feature. So you can kind of see how those are I'm not just only showing website-related work right now. I'm showing a variety of work while still focusing on that resource category. Finally, I usually have a list of ideas towards the bottom of my calendar, or kind of like next up based on where we are in the year. I usually keep about 5 or so ideas, basically what I call on deck, that I might be ready or looking to pull into my content calendar in the coming weeks. I typically look at this calendar on a monthly basis and try and plan out a couple weeks ahead, looking at generally what themes might I be looking at for the next 4 weeks. And then on a weekly basis, I come back to this and start to look at my Instagram planner as to what am I specifically going to be posting this week in terms of what visuals I will showcase for that particular theme, and what like blog or other type of content I need to create in relationship to that. So this is where it starts in Google Sheets. And now let's take a look at how that manifests on Instagram. This is a screenshot of basically what we have recently shared on Instagram. And you'll see on the left that my visual focus lately has really been on rotating the services that we feature on a weekly basis. So you can see how I do 3 posts per week that have a central theme of one type of service. And then that changes each week. So as you move down the feed, you get sort of a varied selection of services that we're showcasing. On the right, you can also see how I loosely try to pattern my visuals on an every other post as well. This is a little less obvious, but you can sort of see a back and forth in terms of saturation and complexity in my imagery. Like I mentioned before, the overall visual of Campfire's Instagram feed is really important to us because we're in the design industry. This doesn't necessarily have to be something that you really pay that much attention to, but I wanted you to see how we do it and how much effort we kind of put into both angles of patterning. Okay, so to recap, start with some content ideas, begin to categorize and organize them. Then think about creating a pattern by using a repeating set of categories or visual elements. Then schedule and post your content in the pattern. And then let those website clicks, comments, and likes roll in. It sounds easy, but I know it's harder than it looks. It does require a fair amount of effort, but I promise if you put some effort into the beginning creation of some of these templates and spreadsheets, it will really help you on a monthly and weekly basis in terms of implementing the content that you really are excited about. Finally, real quick, I wanted to do a bonus round of some of my favorite apps that help me in my content planning process. Google Sheets. Okay. That one's not an app, but I really do use this religiously because I love the flexibility it gives me to plan. It allows me to jot down ideas, allows me to really easily organize them, to add things, to move around columns and rows. And it really has been the most helpful calendar for me. I've tried a couple different ones, and really just creating one that said the things that I needed it to say was actually the thing that got me to use a content calendar on a regular basis. For Instagram posts, Planoly is my favorite tool. For us, planning Instagram is a very visual process as well as it is content-based. So this is one that I really love because it lets me see a more visual approach to Instagram. It also saves hashtags. It's got a free version. It has a nice interface. For stories on Instagram, Unfold is a nice app if you kind of want to tidy them up, use custom fonts, make them a little bit more designed. Unfold is a great app for that. For photo editing, A Color Story is one of my favorite apps. Their filters just tend to be able to get me there faster than Visco and some of the other ones. And most recently, I added Caption Writer to my toolbox. So I was having trouble making those nice enter breaks in an Instagram caption, and this tool helped me figure that out. I think there's a way to do it natively. I just wasn't doing a great job at it. So Caption Writer has been helping me out most recently. And that's all I've got for you guys today. What questions do you have? What are you thinking about? I know this was a lot we covered in about 20 minutes. So let me know what you guys are thinking. I'm going to see if I can pull back Chelsea up here and we'll unfocus this. Hey.
Hello, I'm back.
Awesome.
Okay, let's look at some questions. We did have a couple roll in. We'll start from one from Jenny. Will this be available to view again later? I'd love to share this with my graduating seniors as they're currently working on their own brands, and there are so many good takeaways.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So Crowdcast is a really awesome platform. They do the recording, the whole thing. I will download that. I will upload it to Instagram, and then I'll just add it back to the blog post. So where it's previously said RSVP, I'll just change that button to say watch the replay. And I can send out an email if you guys want and just remind you, send you a link.
Awesome. This one I just put in there. I thought it would be good to mention. A little mention on the Instagram algorithm and if that plays a part in Campfire's process or not.
Yeah, so algorithms on social are changing all the time, and it can be really hard to keep up. So basically what I've done is I've kind of just more taken the approach as to what are my goals. And I kind of have two main ones. I want to send people to our website, and I want to showcase all of our services on a rotating basis. So I know that Instagram's algorithm is not going to allow my posts that are more graphic or more website focused. They just don't perform as well as basically, let's say like a picture of an interior design. Photos of interiors do really well on Instagram, but I still post brand and website stuff on Instagram because it's important to me to tell a story about all of our services. So while I think sometimes it's important to pay attention to that stuff, unless you are really, really, really product focused and a lot of your, direct sales come from a platform, I would say pay more attention to your bigger goals, because being swayed by an algorithm can really exhaust you really quickly.
Okay, we have another one from Taylor. How do you manage the captions for social media posts? What is the process to creating that, and how does that reflect in the patterns?
Yeah, I think it kind of sometimes depends on your bandwidth. So the app that I use for planning Instagram is Planoly, and they have the ability to add in your images as well as your captions. And I'll say some weeks I'm better at pre-planning my captions, and sometimes I just kind of do it on the fly. One of the things that I have been considering, just in terms of overall paying attention to engagement and some of our analytics, is that I've started asking more questions in my captions. That's not necessarily pattern specific, but it just is something that, as I've paid attention to our engagement, I've noticed that people comment more when you ask them a question. It seems sort of straightforward, but it's not always that obvious. So I wouldn't say I have a specific pattern to the way that I write captions, but if it's hard for you to write captions or you have a hard time with that, I would encourage you to jot down some ideas about what you hope to write in your caption ahead of time and put that in some type of planner.
All right, this is from Janice. How do you distribute responsibilities on your team to create marketing work? Example, who's responsible for coming up with the ideas and what to post, and who's responsible for executing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Campfire is lucky enough that we, in my role, I have enough bandwidth in marketing to business development, which is specifically my role, that I can take on the majority of this work. I will say that one of the things that I have found really helpful is that in that brainstorming process, I do bring in additional team members. So specifically, I'm more involved sometimes in our branding and website projects. So I have a lot of ideas about what aspects of that work can be translated into interesting content. Whereas with interior design, I'm less connected with those projects. So I sat down recently, I think it was maybe a month ago, I worked with one of our interior designers, Rachel, and said, basically, let's just big picture brainstorm. So we sat down for 2 hours and we talked about all the different elements of the interior design process and our services and our expertise and just what stuff do we have available? Okay, we've got a lot of banks of images, what could we do with that? How could we organize that in an interesting way? So I really worked with her to brainstorm ideas around that specific service. And then sometimes, depending on the type of, let's say, content that we're going to share, if we want to write a blog post, for instance, on a project that is completed that I don't know that much about, typically the way I'll approach collaborating with someone on our team is I try to basically make it as easy for them to give me the information I need to write about or share about the project. So typically that's just a conversation where I will ask them a number of questions, I'll take notes, and then I turn all of that basically raw data, whether that's images and sketches and initial information, and I'll turn that into paragraphs in a blog post in some kind of organized format that people can engage with. So long story short, I think that's, 75% of the effort is really in my court. And then I try to pull people in as I need additional ideas or information, but really trying to make it as easy on them as possible for us to be able to get the content out. I know that some folks do a thing where they'll kind of say, everybody's responsible for blog writing. Everybody has to write one blog a month or something. And I think maybe for teams that are more writing heavy, where writing might be more of a part of their career. When you're kind of I'm in a designer bubble where I'm working with other designers, writing is not always a thing that they're super excited about or that they feel very skilled at. So I try to take the part of the process that is hard for them off of their plate so that we can still get voices from the whole team. I hope that answers your question.
That's good. Good answer. Okay, we have one from Nicole. What kind of camera do you use? Can you really get away with iPhone photos or not really? ?
I think that's a great question. We have a whole blog post actually on our blog about investing in branded photography. I will say that probably less than 25% of the photos on our feed and the photos that I share are photos that we ourselves have taken. I think that can sometimes be hard, especially when you're not in an industry where you have you're able to take a picture of what you've done. But I will say, if you are the sole person using and creating your content, if you are using a visual platform like something like Instagram, to me, it's important that you lean into what that platform does and what people like on it. So if you really want to post on Instagram, I would encourage you to invest in professional photography as much as you can, whether that is just photos of you working, whether that is photos of your finished projects, whether that is just other general stuff. We use our we do basically one photo shoot, kind of like working photo shoot of our team, maybe once a year, once every other year. We'll do headshots, and then we do tons of working photos. We'll say okay, let's pretend you're doing this, pretend you're doing this. What are all the aspects of our process? Can we get photos of that? I do try to take a lot of behind the scenes photos, but honestly, 9 times out of 10, I'm just not typically happy with how they look via my phone. We don't do any in-house professional photography, if that makes sense. So I don't have a ton of examples of, what camera you should use. Basically, I would say find a good photography partner and find ways to invest in that at least once a year, so that you have a bank of really strong images that you can pull from, that you're excited to pull from, that make your job feel easier when you're creating content.
All right, moving on. We have one from Amy. How do you use stories versus posts on Instagram? Do you stick to the pattern for stories as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe if I were to be totally honest, getting a little bit more focused and strategic with our stories is definitely something that's kind of on our to-do list. We've kind of approached our planning of our content in a way that fits our bandwidth, right? So more and more, we've really invested in our blog, and I think we've gotten that to a point that feels really good, that we can post often, and then it feels relevant, and we have a good pattern for that at this point. And the same thing with Instagram. So I feel like now that the two of those are going pretty well, my next phase would be to say, okay, how can we start to use stories a little bit more strategically? We've talked a lot about, could we do more Instagram lives? Could we do more just repeated series of things that we do on stories? I would say right now, mostly what I use stories for is to promote something maybe that's really timely, or to share and uplift post of our clients or sort of colleagues or friends in the industry. That's kind of what we use our stories for. If you have the bandwidth, I would say definitely considering how your stories fold into your pattern makes a lot of sense. But right now we haven't totally dived into that, but I'm excited to try and do that soon.
Okay, this one's from Carl J. What strategies, I went to the top. What strategies are effective when following users and trying to get more followers to my brand's content?
Yeah, so I have to give a really awesome shout out to Sam at the Richmond Experience for teaching me this. But the number one thing that I have found to really try and build your following is to go comment on other people's posts. This is specifically for Instagram, which is our main platform for social media. But it has really been the best trick that I've ever found to actively get, let's say 5 to 10 followers per week, is to go out and look up hashtags or locations that are relevant to your industry, your offerings, your services, and go out and comment on other people's posts. I don't know what it is about the algorithm that it's not necessarily the person you comment on will be the person that follows you, but it just sort of uplifts your name in what people see, and we get consistently a lot more followers from that. Additionally, anything you can do where people are going to cross promote what you're up to is a really, really good strategy to get a bigger audience or a bigger following. So thank you to everybody who shared information about this workshop specifically. That was awesome. We got a lot of new followers from that. And so that was really cool. But also uplifting, your clients' work, your collaborators' work, anything that you're doing where you can tag someone else and invite them into your post. People are just more likely to share it. And that's a great way to get and engage and build your following. And you could even be more purposeful with it than just shares. You could do a collaborative Instagram story or Instagram live with another company. You could do like a giveaway if you have a product or something. And I know a lot of small businesses do that, where they'll do a giveaway and it'll be like 3 different small businesses and you have to tag lots of people. And I think that's another strategy for just expanding who's exposed to your brand online.
Kind of piggybacking off of this, there's another question about from Allison. How do you strategize hashtags kind of into that?
Yeah, so I think it sort of just depends on your goals, right? So to me, hashtags are about getting people who are going to Instagram and they're exploring, right? So if you consider like how you look at hashtags, right? Sometimes I'll look them up based on typically like location is usually how I look them up, but it's basically a way that you can kind of get in front of people who either follow hashtags or are using that explore feature. So to me, it kind of depends on your goals. Campfire, we are a pretty local company in terms of the services we offer. The majority of our clients are in the state of Virginia. So I'm really focused on getting clients in that area. I add hashtags to hopefully build our audience, but truly, I'm not really sure always how much it really does for us. I do occasionally, probably once a year, do a little bit of research on hashtags. So I'll go in and see, okay, what kind of new interior design hashtags are folks using? I'll look up really successful bloggers and things like that to kind of peek at like what hashtags are they using to talk about their work. This is a great thing to do with to kind of keep a running list of basically brand crushes. So you can do this with like basically other folks that are in your industry or other businesses that you really admire and kind of look up, okay, what are they doing? What are they sharing? What hashtags are they using? So I think, it could kind of be as strategic as you need it to be. For us, for me, it's kind of just like making sure that we're trying to get our stuff a little bit higher in the Explore, but I don't think that it's the number one way people find us. So I don't put too much effort into it, if that makes sense.
Okay, one more just popped in from Carl. How can you connect a story or narrative throughout a platform like Instagram and drive users to engage deeper on a website, blog, or long form content?
How can you connect a story or narrative throughout a platform? I think the way I would answer that is if you are trying to engage a lot of interaction in a particular area of your website, whether that be you really want people to read a blog or sign up for an event or something like that, one of the things, in going back to the algorithm question, a lot of your followers don't see what you post. And that's not your fault or their fault. It's just kind of the nature of the platform. So posting often and in different ways is a really helpful way to make sure that people see the thing that you want them to see. So this is something that's sort of informed my strategy with, instead of posting, originally I was posting every other day. That was kind of my main pattern of going back and forth from I'll post brand or web, I'll post interiors, I'll post brand or web, I'll post interiors, right? But it was making it so that I was only posting one time about each topic that I wanted to share. So I transitioned more to posting 3 times about one theme or topic. And I think that has really helped us give people more opportunities to engage with the information I want them to engage with. So now, for instance, this particular workshop, I posted 3 times on Instagram this week. Each time I mentioned this workshop. And then there was also, I think we put it in our stories. So I think it's kind of just like making sure that you're saying the same thing or talking about the same topic in different ways, in different spaces. hopefully that answers your question.
There is one, oh, he said that's great. So great. There was one in here from Karen that said that she missed the workshop last week, and would it be available for viewing, or if people couldn't come to today's workshop as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think at the top of the hour, we maybe mentioned we are going to, this whole thing is being recorded. We'll pop it up on YouTube, and then we'll add a link to our blog within our blog. And the last workshop that we also did is also listed there. There's a recap video that you can watch.
Great.
Yeah, so we'll have that. And the last thing I was going to say, let me just add this here. Let me turn on this call to action. So there's a button down at the bottom of your screen that I just turned on that says download our content calendar. So I know that you guys kind of got to see like fuzzy screenshots of the content calendar we use. And as we were working through this morning, we thought that you guys might be interested in having a copy of that. And so if you go to that link, it'll take you to our blog post. If you just fill out a little form, tell us your name and your email address, we're going to create a template of the content calendar that we use, and then we'll send a link out to that probably early next week so that you guys can have access to that. And yeah, if there's no other questions, we just wanted to say thank you guys so much for joining us. It was really fun to be able to put together this content, and it was really helpful sometimes to remind yourself, wait, how do I do that again? So thank you guys again for all of that. And if you want to join us on Instagram, we're just at Campfire Co. We'll give you a follow back and start engaging with each other's content online and prop each other up. Thank you guys so much for having us.
Thanks, everyone.